We're headed across the pond on this episode of Ice Ice Beta, and as always, I'm your host, Aaron Gary. Today, we're chatting with Willis Morris and Oz Miller of the Scottish Dry Tooling Club. The club has been called the developmental model of the future, a rolling circus, and bonkers by various authorities. But what is the organization? How does it work? And why has it been so successful in just a few short years? A few anecdotes to highlight their success. One, they are the largest dry tooling club in the world with hundreds of members. Two, the GB Youth Ice Climbing Team, who are part of the club, are one of, if not the, strongest in the world. Meanwhile, most other national teams have few, if any, youth members. And three, and most importantly, by internal metrics, the psyche is very, very high. With a rapid growth trajectory and big plans, the future is bright. After listening to Willis and Oz, you'll probably agree. They're quite convincing. But before we get to today's episode, a quick message from our sponsor. Blue ice is the best kind of ice, and also my choice when it comes to fast and light ice climbing gear. The aerolites go in like hot knife through butter, and their climbing packs hit the sweet spot between function and lightweight. Designed to get to the point in the Alpine, the gear is tested by mountain professionals between the Alps and the Wasatch. If you're looking to get to the point too, and with a little less weight in your kit, check out Blue Ice's gear at blueice.com or your favorite local retailer. Now for the chat with Willis and Oz, which took place just before the World Cup at Cheongsong in South Korea. How was the travel to Korea for you guys?
Kind of effortless, really. I had an absolute epic getting here last year because I didn't fill in my visa correctly. I actually got my own birthday wrong. So every stage of the trip was just like a complete nightmare. And I'm phoning people at 4 a.m. trying to help me, and like they can't do anything. And so this year, arriving in Edinburgh and then getting to Seoul in just one go was just beautiful. It was so good.
It was really easy.
Yeah, it was.
We booked a nice hotel. We got here super early before the comp. So
Yeah.
lots of time to kind of relax and sort the jet lag and just sort ourselves out. So, and we got all our luggage. So it's pretty common. People lose luggage coming across the world, and it's like all your kit's in it, and you have to compete on borrowed axes. But no, we're all good this time, so it's good.
Well, you were enlightening me about last year, all the tragedy that you encountered. Did you end up getting through? You ended up competing all right?
Yeah, so ended up getting through, and I applied for my visa again, paid £40 for a premium to actually get it done faster. Turns out the website that I had used to book that was completely fake. This whole time I'm waiting for this premium visa to come through. I haven't actually retried to get it, and I'm at the gate in France, and it's actually funny because the guy that takes the photo for my visa, you can see in my face that I'm just done in. I've had enough. Like, I think I was in the airport for like close to 50 hours. Just hadn't slept anything. It was horrible. But you've just got to keep going.
Damn.
If
If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, I guess.
Yeah, I was definitely weaker. After that.
Well, how's it been? Because when did you guys arrive?
Yeah, we arrived on Monday morning. So we left on Sunday, arrived on Monday morning. And then like you have the first day, because obviously we go forward 9 hours. So we had the first day like fighting to stay awake.
Yeah.
Because when we got here, we'd slept all night on the plane deliberately. And then you kind of fight to stay awake the whole time so that you can then finally get into bed in the evening and like collapse. But it means at least when you wake up after that first sleep in Korea, your jet lag's kind of disappeared and you're refreshed. I think that's the best way to do it, because otherwise you spend the whole time in kind of a limbo of half awake, half asleep.
Yeah, we got out yesterday and we trained as well. That was like a big help. So last night, 10 o'clock, our time here, got to sleep, and then kind of woke up this morning, 7 o'clock, no problem. So yeah, I think we reset and kind of ready to go.
I saw on the Instagrams that all the cool kids are hanging out together at the gym.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking sick when you walk in there. It's incredible. It's like, I don't think there's anywhere in Europe that is kind of like that, I would say.
It's so open. Like I think there's quite a lot of like red tape and boundaries and health and safety, especially in the UK. Christ, our dry tooling box has got like, it is a box. It's physically got like perspex walls so that nobody could accidentally walk in. Whereas this is like an open dry tooling area in a gym that you can just like rock up with ice tools. But it was very cool.
They even have like an auto belay that covers probably about 6 meters, 7 meters. And I remember just being so psyched out of my mind. And if that was a normal climber who went into a gym and seen that the auto belays were only 6 meters high, they'd be like, what is this? But it was actually amazing to go up the way instead of just like constantly traversing. So no, it was awesome gym.
It was a good training session to go in and have, you got the Swiss guys, you got the French, Who else was there? We had the Dutch
guys arrived.
A lot of the kind of big names, I guess, in the sport at the moment.
Emer was there as well.
Yeah, kind of World Cup medalists and podium climbers all kind of mixing in together and climbing and just kind of having a good session.
Do you guys know Tom Burney? He used to compete back with, he got into it with Emer. They met in Korea.
Okay.
He was stationed over there, but he ended up getting connected with Emer through a mutual rock climbing friend. And then he got invited to like train with their like UIAA coach. And that's how he started competing, I want to say like 8 years ago. So he was on last episode 2 weeks ago. He was saying like, you got to go on a gastro tour. You got to eat all the food.
We went to a Korean fried chicken place the first time. That was pretty awesome. And then we went for brunch yesterday. But see the way that Google Maps doesn't work here? It's quite hard to like navigate and find some places, but everywhere we've eaten's been pretty good. I think maybe today we're going to spend a bit more time and get somewhere really, really good for dinner tonight.
Yeah, we want to go to some like proper Korean places.
Yeah.
Like, was it bibimbap?
Yeah,
seemed really good. Kind of like proper Korean food, but really tasty. And yeah, it's been good. It's been really good.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Traveling about on the trains and stuff has been, I think we've got it dialed now.
It took a wee while, but we got it done.
Yeah.
It's just difficult, you know, like, it's funny. Robbie from our team, he's just like, he's only 15. He literally turned 16 the day before the comp. So he's like young, super psyched. You know, he's come all the way out to Korea, but he's kind of mind blown by like, he's just like, I don't understand how we're meant to do anything. Like, all the signs are in symbols. And it's just funny.
Yeah. It is an incredible place. So it is, like I said yesterday, it's totally different to being like Europe or like in America. They do have like a different way of life here, totally. And like, tattoos aren't a thing here, and smoking.
Nobody smokes.
Nobody smokes. Nobody.
Oh, that's not what I was expecting. Because I thought smoking was still cool, like it is in Europe.
Well, I think like I've been to Thailand and Vietnam and stuff, and like everybody smokes. Whereas, to be honest, it might just be that we don't see anybody smoking. Like,
not it's a thing that they do in private rather than they do.
Which is like
maybe you have to go to an underground bunker to do it or something. Like, not,
the
not
underground smoking scene in Korea is sick.
So, do you want to just do a quick intro of yourselves?
Yeah, cool. I'm Willis Morris. I'm a senior athlete on the GB ice climbing team. I'm also the president of the Scottish Dry Tooling Club and kind of one of the original founders of the club. I've been involved in the indoor dry tooling scene and the competition scene for quite a few years now. I do a lot of coaching with the youths in the UK and the GB team, and just seem to kind of be helping out organize everything at the moment on the kind of the main front of dry tooling in the UK.
My name's Oz Miller. I'm a senior athlete on the GB ice climbing team, and I'm also vice president of the Scottish Dry Tooling Club. This will probably be me about 2.5 years kind of like into climbing. Never did any form of climbing before I started dry tooling, and the first ever time I even put on a harness was at a Scottish Dry Tooling Club event.
I'd love to hear the story of like how you found the club and what was going on at the time when you were getting into dry tooling.
I basically ended a relationship, and I had moved from one part of Scotland to the next. So I'm originally from a small island off the west coast of Scotland, and I found myself living in a place called Fife, and I was like, there's not really anything going on here. When that relationship ended, I was like, if I want another relationship, I'm going to have to go to the gym. I'm going to have to do something. So I trained quite a lot, and then kind of think, what am I training for? This is kind of crazy. And I was thinking that all the time, like, I've got to find something to put this kind of energy into. And then moved to Glasgow, and I kid you not, just lying in bed one night and I see this advert pop up on Instagram saying the Scottish Dry Tooling Club are having an event this weekend. I was like, that would be amazing, but I don't have any gear or anything. So I phoned GCC, the climbing centre, and of course it's Willis that answers. And I'm like, dude, I don't have any shoes or harness or anything. He's like, oh, just come in and we'll sort you out and that. So had this harness, had these shoes, and turned up to the first event. It was just like instant addiction. And I just remember looking around being like, this is unbelievable. Everyone getting on so well, and just like a real community that I'd always kind of been looking for, and I felt like I had found it that night. And then they actually had an event the next day. So I'm like, oh, I've got to go to that. So it was like first introduction to climbing of any type, indoor dry tooling. And then on the Sunday, we went outdoor climbing, did some sport. It was just amazing. It was just like the greatest feeling ever. And here we are in Korea.
That's like such an Instagram story. No one gets into just dry tooling right off the bat. But then like knowing that it's part of like the Instagram generation, like almost kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it is true. But we're finding it more and more often now that people that are coming to our events have got no background in any form of climbing at all. And obviously, I think if you want to be at like the elite end of ice climbing, you have to be like a good boulder. You have to work on every discipline of climbing to make you top tier, because Willis climbs insanely hard in every discipline, winter, sport, trad. It's no surprise why he's so good at competing.
I think having a background helps, and I think going to the elite end of the sport, it might be competition ice climbing that you're competing in, but you're pulling strings from all sorts of disciplines or any experience that you've got. I think it was quite difficult for Oz when you started coming into the sport and being like, I remember it being completely mad when he turned up because he wanted to get on the wall, and me and Caitlin were like, right, let's get you tied into this one. Why don't you go and stick your harness on and we'll get started? And he was like, I don't have a harness. And we were like, oh, okay, no problems. We can lend you one. Okay, cool. Right, harness on. Why don't we tie you in? And he was like, okay, I don't know how to do it. And, there's nothing unusual about having a new climber. I teach a lot of beginner climbers and kind of introduction classes, but to have somebody here stood with ice axes in their hands with absolutely no idea what it's like to kind of move upwards, and then to put you, I think we actually put you on an auto belay for like a dry tooling route that we'd set. And the first time he like moved upwards climbing was with tools. And just to see someone completely, like thrown into the deep end, the deepest of deep ends. And like, you didn't have that background to pull from, but like, it's been amazing watching Oz kind of obviously get better at climbing as well as tooling. And you can really see like every week that goes by, I think you're still like learning basic climbing technique in some ways because you've been so obsessed with dry tooling that you've missed some of those things. But it's so cool because when you see someone do something for the first time on tools, you're like, you must be the first person ever to work out how that works, but with ice axes in your hands. It's awesome.
I know. And I think, see, for outdoor dry tooling, you can get away with being like ferociously strong over technique, but that only gets you so far. And then you're watching wee Kasha who weighs like, I don't know, like 50 kilograms, like nothing, and just gliding through the roof because she has immaculate like feet, keeps all her weight off her arms by using her feet and just doing things so effortlessly. For me to do that move, I'm like 99% power and aggression, but it shouldn't be that way. And you guess, but it's all coming.
There was definitely a moment it clicked where you were like, I don't just have to be strong, I have to be good. And like you changed that focus to like improving what you've got rather than just getting brutally strong. I always said this to Oz, and he was like, why can't I do this move? And I was like, Oz, you're about 7 times stronger than you need to be to do that move.
Yeah.
You just need to do it perfectly. And then like you nail it and you're like, that's awesome. So yeah, it is cool. But it is cool seeing so many people come from the same sort of place, new to climbing. They've been indoor bouldering a couple of times, and then they're like, hey, you know what? That's a legit discipline. Let's go and try dry tooling.
That's the thing. It is totally legit. It only takes such a short period of time for people from being like, to being like, I'm in. Like, wholeheartedly, and like moving cities, doing everything, coming away on trips. We have someone in the club who had never been to like Europe before or really traveled ever, or like had a passport and coming away with us. And it's just so good to see that you're impacting people's lives in a good way.
I think you can measure the psyche in Glasgow or in Scotland at the moment by like the amount of kit that has been sold.
Yeah.
Like I cannot tell you how many fruit boots have been sold in Scotland in the last 2 years. I mean, it's like to the point where the distributors are being like, what are you guys doing with these boots?
Yeah.
Because we've sold, 30 pairs to in Scotland in the last 5 years, and now we sold 30 pairs in a month.
And like the largest concentration of Iranian axes are in Glasgow. Like, what is happening?
Is that ICT? Is that where they're from?
Yeah, ICT. Yeah.
We will talk about what the club actually is, but what do you think it is about the sport of dry tooling that is so appealing to folks? Because I actually had a very similar experience. The first time I picked up the tools, it was like super bouldering, but then the movements themselves are like really fun and big and burly and powerful, but also like really technical and delicate, which is, you don't get in other sports.
I guess there's kind of two sides to it. I think the physical attraction, like a lot of climbing, it is a cool thing to do. The kind of modern style of like bouldering, super dynamic movement, lots of big moves. You're really swinging about. It's not just static climbing where you have to just have strong fingers. I think it's really taken off because it's really fun. It's energetic. It's dynamic. And I think with dry tooling, it's a really extreme version of that. You're just swinging about, but you're also swinging about on ice axes. There's often like swinging and moving things in the roof. So it is really kind of acrobatic and exciting. You know, it's crazy how we can have a beginner event. Before the end of the night, all the beginners are trying to fig 4 and fig 9. And although they might not be very good at it, they see it and, you know, it's one of those things you just want to try. Like when you go to a bouldering gym and someone does a really cool dyno. It doesn't have to be hard to be fun. And then I think the other side is that the community. Yeah. I think because dry tooling, it's kind of been a bit of a dark art for the last couple of years, or, you know, for the last decade, especially in the UK, where it's had a negative stigma. Lots of people are worried about what dry tooling is going to do to rock climbing crags. And I understand it, but it's also completely wrong. And I think the more you tell someone, oh, you can't do that, see, when they start doing it, they love it even more. And then they get into this community, which are all like really self-sustaining and want to look after each other. And I think people are so psyched for each other in tooling, just like in the big climbing community, but there's no ego in it. I think it's a really supportive community. So when you have something that's fun and supportive, it's really hard not to get addicted.
There's always in the back of people's minds as well that, see, if you get really strong on tools, that will make you a better winter climber, or it'll certainly progress your grades in a way. In the past, that would take maybe 25 years of climbing grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and doing it like that. I feel the training that you would do in the cave or at the works, which we have, it's our outdoor drive to and crag that we kind of go to all the time, it just gets you strong and gets you moving on very, very natural things without the cold, the fear, all of these elements. And it's just a great form of training where you can't get into the mountains. And in Scotland, the conditions are just, you could have the greatest day of your life one day, and then the next, there's absolutely nothing to go at. The Scottish winter season, although it might last maybe 5 or 6 months, might actually only be on a good year or a bad year. You know, those days could go from 30 days a year to, you know, you get out all season or nothing.
The training definitely helps. A lot of people come to the tooling club or come to the events purely do some time on tools. You're going to make improvements. Mm-hmm. And that's been shown world over. You know, you look at some of the best winter climbers and alpinists, they're all dry tooling in their spare time. You know, it's part of their regular training sessions. You look at Greg Boswell, you know, who really made such a massive step in...
bring the ruckus and Loch Nagar. And you watch him, I've seen that move is at the works called quick release, where you go from here and then you literally swing, and he replicates that move on Bring the Ruckus, and it got given grade 13. How many grades in Scotland are like 10, 11, where it's all roof, in a roof, and doing these moves? I think if you want to hit the high in Scottish winter climbing, having a background in dry tooling's massive.
I think it helps give you the tank. But to be honest, even if you're just an ice climber, I say just an ice climber, but you know what I mean? If you're climbing grade 4, grade 5 ice, and that's, you know, it's not necessarily that strenuous if you've got good technique, but having that time on your tools in the off season so that when you are like in the red and your arms are burning, rather than be freaking out, you're like, you know what, this is a usual session. You know, if you're used to being pumped on tools, it's not a scary experience. You can kind of deal with it. You can learn to shake out. You can learn to rest, and you can really learn to recover on your ice axes, because they should, in theory, be really good holds. I think more time on tools, the better experience you're going to have in the mountains, for sure.
Just before we move on from anything else, it's like what we do with the club as well is giving people a safe environment to do these things well. If people want to go out into the Scottish hills in winter, we run a winter skills course with the club. People who are brand new are getting to meet people who are well established in the community, who have done a lot of it, who have a lot of mileage. So they're not having to go on Facebook and be like, I have a rack, a rope, and my mum's letting me borrow her car, and like, I've got 3 sandwiches. Do you want to go out? Never be late in my life, but I'm pretty sure they'll be okay. You know, all of that's come out. I really do like to think we're making the whole thing like safer for newbies and people who have never done it.
Yeah, let's talk about the club itself. What is the Scottish Dry Tooling Club?
Poor, what is it not?
Fair.
The club, it's a non-profit organization that's run by volunteers and a committee of volunteers that is based in Glasgow, but it does nationwide events, all to do with dry tooling and competition ice climbing. These events, you know, we raise money through charging people to come to them. Every penny goes back into the club to be able to buy holds, equipment, all the things you need to be able to set up effectively a rolling circus, which is all based around ice climbing and dry tooling. What we do is we turn up to a climbing center. We have trained route setters that have been paid for their training through the club, with all the equipment that's owned by the club, with all the holds. You can see where I'm going with this. So we take over a climbing center. We set a load of routes and boulders. This can be a bouldering gym or it can be a roped gym. We bring 30 pairs of ice climbing tools, sometimes fruit boots and things like that if we're having an event with kind of the kickboards as well. We run introduction classes. Effectively, it becomes a night which people from that city or town can book onto, turn up and have no experience of climbing with ice axes ever, and get really, really good training and experiences climbing on ice climbing and dry tooling routes. It's supported by the GB ice climbing team. So all the athletes from the team help coach and look after new climbers that come along. They also use it as like training sessions for themselves. And it's just this big community that started out of these events. Unfortunately, it kind of snowballed into something way bigger than it was meant to. And now it is this kind of life-dominating thing that is people's like whole life. People are members of the club. They go out with members of the club. The socials are club nights. The training days are club nights. The trips away are club days. And it's just become this community of climbers that have got together that, yes, is predominantly focused on dry tooling, but are all climbers as a whole. And this massive network of climbers that no matter what you're doing now, the club has a hand in it in some way, shape, or form.
I think the best thing that we do as a club is so we make the whole experience accessible to everyone. I mean, like absolutely everyone. We run intros for the youth. Parents will get in touch and go, my kid wants to do this. See, for me, I'm going to turn 32 soon, so I'll go and do a coaching session with someone who's like 15, 14. I'll explain to them a couple of moves and everything. They're doing what probably took me a year to understand, to get into my brain. They're just doing it. It's just incredible to see. And see if we keep going the way we're going, the young people that we can get can copy off our notes. So it can take like maybe 8-9 months off the learning process because we can master our teaching and they can understand it, because dry tooling is not a cheap thing to do. Like see axes, boots and everything. It is quite expensive, but at the club now, I don't know how many pairs of fruit boots and axes we have. And you can let people have that. All they have to do, become a member, and they can use that as much as they want in the cave and have a go.
So the club is like a membership basis. So you buy like an annual subscription to the club. It's as cheap as it could possibly ever be. It's £37.50 for a year's subscription. You pay £37 and you get to join the club for an entire year. That gives you unlimited access to all the club equipment. So you can rock up to go dry tooling somewhere and you can borrow club axes, which, you know, you can borrow £1,000 competition carbon fiber axes and £1,000 fruit boots with crampons. And if you want to go sport climbing with people from the club, we've got 60-meter ropes and quick draw sets and the rack that you need to go out and do it, a clip stick and other things that you might need but don't have, making it accessible. Because it's not just the cost, it's also the energy and the effort required to go climbing nowadays. It can feel like hard work. And we kind of want to just break those boundaries down. So whether it's because you don't have the cash, whether you don't have the experience, or you don't have the kind of confidence. There's a lot of people that come to us and they want to get into something, but it's not necessarily because it's climbing. It's because it's so supportive. They love the kind of network and the fact that they might not really be here to do much climbing, but they're making friends and they're joining a community that is supporting them, whether they're doing 3 moves on a route or whether they're doing 300. It's not really about how good you are. It's about how psyched you are for it.
It is quite cool in the way that, see, you topping like a finals. We get a new member coming out to try like a European, an Open, and see if they do 4 moves. It is the same buzz that the crowd get from like Willis topping a final to this person doing like 4 moves. And just people just love people trying hard. And that seems to be everywhere. You just turn around and you keep looking and people are trying hard and people love that.
The community and the feel that the club has, was that intentional on your part, or how do you think that developed?
I don't think you can set up an ethos or a culture. It just happens the way it happens. And I think I cannot tell you the amount of work that Willis, Kasha, Caitlin did at the beginning. And I think it's like an old thing that they say is like, if you build good foundations, then you're going to have a happy fucking whatever. But it's like they did all that such hard work to make people like me want to come. And then it kind of just grows. And I think if you get that attitude and that ethos right from the beginning, then it just kind of flurries and take over from there.
It's hard to talk about the club without kind of talking about where it started. The club originated when myself and Caitlin Connor, another member of the GB ice climbing team, she's kind of like the queen of GB ice climbing at the moment. It's pretty cool. Effectively, me and Caitlin were kind of one of the only 2 competitors in the UK that were kind of serious about the sport at that time. Obviously, we all know what happened in 2019. The world shut down and everybody had to stay indoors. And we were obviously still wanting to train and things like that. So we built an outdoor dry tooling home wall and we trained on it kind of all through the off season. with the COVID times, we had a lot of people, as restrictions start to loosen off, being like, oh, that looks really cool. Can we come and have a go? Can we come and get involved? Because indoor climbing gyms were still shut. But it was this kind of like fine line in the restrictions where you could meet people outdoors and you could do a sport if you were kind of social distancing. And we ended up with these kind of like mini events where people would come and try dry tooling at Caitlin's home wall because it was allowed. So the moment climbing walls opened up, we thought, oh, it'd be cool to kind of run an indoor event and see if we can get a few more people, or just give all these people a chance to climb at once. And I remember we set all these routes and we ran a little introduction class downstairs for new people, which was like 5 or 6 new people. And I remember coming back up the stairs to the main gym for the event to start. And there was like 100 people in the gym. And I was like, oh my God, what have we done? And it was this wild kind of moment of like wide eyes going, what have we, this can't be real. These guys cannot all be here for dry tooling. And we ran this event and it was a bit chaotic because we didn't really know what we were doing. But we left that event going, okay, we have to do something with this. There is clearly a demand for it. And I think we had 4 pairs of ice axes at that event. So you can imagine 100 people scrabbling over like 4 pairs of tools. There was only like 10 routes set. And it was just like, imagine if we had a load of ice axes, and imagine if we had 30 routes set, and imagine if there wasn't just me and you trying to teach. And it just kind of grew arms and legs. Mm. What we put in at the start, we were working 40-hour weeks running the club, each on top of a 40-hour working life, on top of training as being athletes. We spent a year, maybe a year and a half, absolutely ragging ourselves to build this thing that now is like self-sustaining. And I think that's my proudest moment of like this whole thing, when I step outside of the system and look at it. When I take a step back and I'm not there, or maybe I'm away, or there's an event going on, the system doesn't break down. I go away and all of a sudden I can see like on the committee chat, oh, we're having an event this weekend. Oz is going to be head route setter. And we've got all the other youth squad that are coming along to help teach. And you kind of see what's going on. And it's mind boggling to see that what we started in Caitlin's back garden is now this massive national enterprise running international competitions and kind of working with the UAA. And like I said, arms, legs, and tentacles, it's crazy.
You're going to have to change the name. Scottish Dry Tooling Club's a little exclusionary, huh?
Well, it's already changed once. When we started that initial thing, it was called the Glasgow Dry Tooling Club. And we always laugh because we've got some of the original logos and it's like the same logo, but it says Glasgow. And everyone's like, did you make them up for a joke? And I'm like, no, that is the original. We changed it because I remember being like, this is way too big to just limit it to Glasgow.
It's pretty cool because you've got the ice coop out in America.
Yeah, in Boulder.
I think what we've done, I'm going to take massive credit for this, by the way. I think like the club,
Do it.
So many people have seen what we've done. Like the Dutch, the Polish,
Spanish.
Yeah. They're like, here, you know what? See if you get other good climbers to climb with you, you get better. And see if you get young youths to come. It means that one day when you don't have to compete, they'll put you out the team and then you can coach them and it becomes this thing. I've only been doing this, like this is my 3rd season now, and the vibe has changed. People seem to be much more friendly. There's more people now than there's ever been, would you say, European Cups and stuff?
I think so, yeah. I think people are taking the kind of manual script that we've written of like, get some holds, and get some tools, and get some people that know what they're doing, and teach others, which isn't, it's not a mind-blowing concept, but it's quite hard to do with dry tooling because there's accessibility, there's getting indoor rock climbing walls to kind of want to do it. And we've been approached by so many federations or just climbing clubs being like, how do we do something like this? And we're definitely keen on helping as many people do it. It has been cool to see how many people have naturally replicated what we've done and have kind of looked at the results that we're starting to see. I always find it funny when we talk to the Swiss team because the Swiss team are like a powerhouse of competition climbing.
Yeah.
They've got some of the best climbers in the world. And I remember chatting with Simon, the Swiss coach. He's a World Cup winner from the past. He's now coaching the current Swiss team. And he's like saying what the Scottish Dry Tooling Club are doing right now is the future because the Swiss don't have that many youths coming through and they don't have that system of constant renewal of athletes. And it's just cool to think that what we're doing is right. It does work. Look at the results we've had in the competitions with the youths and just seeing the whole community develop. I think it's funny to think that Scotland, tiny country Scotland with not many people in it, has created this kind of manual script for how to run events. And we're now having an influence on the UK. We're having an influence on the international community. We're having an influence on, the international competition scene. It's really grown into a thing that I think everybody has a little something to do with, or at least knows about it, which is quite cool to think.
Do you think it's just like in the Scots' blood that they want to suffer in winter climbing with like tools in their hands?
Yes. Yeah, and it's funny that you should mention suffering there, because every time you go out in Scotland winter climbing, for me personally, there's always that 5-minute part of the day when I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to spend the money I get for my rack on. Like, I'm done. I'm soaking. I'm knackered. I left the house 3 weeks ago to do over just 100 meters of climbing that is like 4 hours off the road. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's not easy. It's like no part of the day is easy.
I wouldn't say it's in the Scots blood, but it's definitely that mentality is passed on for sure. Like, see, when you go out Scottish winter climbing and you suffer, and you're with someone else that suffers, it's horrible, but you have such a good time afterwards. And see, when you take someone out and they suffer, you're kind of like, yeah, you're getting a proper introduction to this sport. See, when you take beginners out in Scottish winter and they have like Bluebird Day and like Bullet Hard Nevy and it's all a bit nice, you're like, yeah, you can't count this as a Scottish day. You can have a nice day, but like, we're not letting you have this as a proper day. I think we all kind of accidentally encourage that kind of deep suffering, and whether that's in the mountains or whether it's just in how hard you work. I think that is integrated into everything you do.
Well, I saw that you've turned one of your teammates into a rope gun in Ben Nevis.
Oh, no, this man here is the rope gun with fucking 100%.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, 100%.
No, it works pretty well, like getting new climbers that are super strong on tools. I mean, like, they can climb M12 and they're absolute wads. And obviously they don't have that much experience in the mountains. And I'm not saying we encourage beginner, non-experienced mountaineers to go out and go into dangerous locations, but going with someone that's experienced that can look after you and teach you the basics of like movement on snow and how to keep yourself safe in the mountains. But then once you actually physically get them to the wall, you've helped them get past the high risk parts and they're in a safe environment to just put their ability to play on the wall. It's pretty wild to see. You know, Rory's 17. He'd never been winter climbing before. And the other day we took him up a grade 8. Which is like pretty hardcore climbing in Scotland. He just absolutely devoured it. You know, it's pretty cool to see that you can see how much tooling and kind of training helps if you can get on to the wall.
Maybe it helps out a wee bit too much, because I think you can definitely tell people who are into dry tooling when they go winter climbing in Scotland because they're putting stuff like their axe in their mouth, and which is just not the normal thing to do. And also, I always think, see all these top climbers who don't match on the bottom handle or side pull and cracks, or how do they do these things if they don't dry tool or competition climb? A lot of these on these really, really hard routes that we do, it's like wee shelves, and that's not foreign to us because we're taking like the smallest piece of metal ever, and you're just so used to taking that and then moving off it and having the discipline not to have pick shifts or move or anything, so it doesn't feel too foreign on that grade.
I think it's amazing to think how many top-end climbers can still learn a lot coming to an event or doing some sessions with competition-focused movement. Maybe less so for the comp side of it, but more for like the difficulty, the way you have to move on these style of holds. Oz did an event with Dave MacLeod, you know, one of Scotland's best ever winter climbers and all-round climbers in the world.
All-round climbers, yeah.
You were able to like teach him something. A guy that's been climbing for less than 3 years is able to show Dave MacLeod something. It just shows that it doesn't matter what level you're at, there's something to learn.
We went to his home wall and me and Caitlin had set up a couple of problems. He just looks at it and he goes, I'm going to knee bar that. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean you're going to knee bar that? What in a tool? And I kid you not, wraps this ball and then has his foot against the wall and then pulls the axe off his own knee to go up. I could actually tell that was the first time in years he's had to look at something and go, I don't know how to do this, or how do I do this? And you can be in this sport for probably plus 10 years and you're climbing, and then you come across a hold that you've never ever seen before. And I think that constant evolution of holds and techniques and different move sequences keeps it so fresh. And I could tell he obviously loves climbing and stuff, but see that moment of almost being a beginner again and having to figure out how to do a sequence or not knowing what a hold was absolutely awesome to see. This is one of the best climbers in the world or that has ever lived doing this. So it happens to everyone. Just that kind of enjoyment of figuring it out.
You know what I didn't realize until our chat, Willis, was that technical ice climbing was started in Scotland.
Yeah, I think I'll probably say a lot of things here and then people will come back and like fact check me. But like, as far as I am aware, you know, technical ice climbing started properly in Scotland. Ben Nevis is the home of steep ice climbing, you know, cutting step era, was forged on what roots were put up in Scotland. And when you look at what they were able to do back then, cutting steps, things that we consider, hard technical classics that people have epics on nowadays, with technical tools and front points and light kit that we've got. And these guys back then were literally cutting steps with a single axe with no crampons on and getting up them. It's just kind of bonkers. When you think about what those guys were able to do at that time, it's pretty cool to think that Scotland's got a big hand to play, or had a big hand to play in kind of the sport that we all know and love. And whether that's, climbing super big, steep mixed lines in the Rockies or Saas-Fee World Cup finals, somewhere, somehow that technical part of climbing with tools started at home where we're from.
I think it's quite important as well that maybe some people think that Scotland might be a good place to go and practice your technique or get good at climbing. Scotland is not a training ground. If you can climb well in Scotland, you can do it anywhere. A lot of people who come back from the Himalayas say that the weather in Scotland is very, very similar to what it's like in the Himalayas. And see, in the Alps, they just don't go out if it's not nice. It's got to be a bluebird day, or they're just like, oh, we're not going to. We don't have that luxury. Over the years, people like Hamish McInnes, who spent a lot of time in Glencoe. If you've ever been to Glencoe, you'll notice there's no houses, but I think the GMCS have a hut at the bottom of the valley, and Hamish McInnes has had a house there. People like Hamish McInnes were like trailblazers, developing things like the mountain rescue in Scotland, and other countries looking at this like a mountain rescue. That's a class idea. Someone to come and get us if we, no doubt, fuck it up. And then making things like stretchers. Now, I don't know why, but see, at this time, Scotland were hell-bent on just like perfecting things. So we used to go from the straight stem axis. What was it they used to say? They were leashless or leashed. They were doing all these hard routes, and that wee tiny stubby axis are leashed onto the wrist, so they can't swap hands. That's just incredible to me that they did any of these routes. They don't have the gear like we do. They didn't have screws. They didn't have any of these things. They used to have rebar that they got on construction sites and then welded like an eye onto them, so you could try and hammer them into the ice and just keep going. It's amazing that the torch just kept on getting passed and passed. And if you look, you can see who takes it on next, was Andy Nesbitt came along behind and then started going from dual crampons to single front point. Once that happened, and once the development of a bit more technical axes, they just went mad. It was like they were having groups of parties from like Aberdeen and Glasgow, sieging places. Getting a new route was incredible. I think the fashion for new routing has come back massively in Scotland in the last wee while. I think it's always an amazing thing to say. Like, people love climbing the hard classics, but also if you get a first ascent in Scotland, it's amazing. It's a great feeling that your name gets to go in a book.
Was Scotland an early adopter for dry tooling too?
So I'm going to go rogue here. I remember reading before when I got into this that something to do with dry tooling at the beginning was a Scottish guy, not in Scotland, it was in Canada. It had nothing to do with like Octopussy, the first ever dry tooling route by Jeff Lowe, but I'm definitely sure there is a story about a Scottish guy. I'm going to go on a limb here as well and say that the first ever competition, sort of ice climbing dry tooling, was held in Scotland.
I think that's right.
I think it's true.
We need to like. This is definitely one of those things we're kind of talking on a fly. But
yeah, I'd love for someone to come out and go actually yes or no to the answer. But the people who like started inventing this and started doing it were obviously thought they were, I don't know, not right to be doing it because they didn't write about it, they didn't sing about it, they certainly like didn't put it anywhere on the internet. Obviously, it wasn't as much of a thing then as it is now. It's hard to actually get the history of the sport. And that's why I think Instagram is cool. I don't care if people look at what I do or anything like that. It's just like a wee diary or something to look back on when I'm an old guy. You can show people. It's for no other kind of reason than that.
Now I'm curious. I'm going to have to see if I can poke around. It's one of those things where it's probably more of like an oral history.
Yeah, and everything in climbing is either complete fabrication of the truth, and it's like I'll never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I think that is the general thing about mountaineering.
I chatted with Marianne van der Steen. She was saying that the term dry tooling was actually started by a Dutch person.
Is that a lie?
That's not two truths and a lie.
Is it true?
That's what she said. I didn't fact check. But that actually brings me to, because you guys keep saying tooling.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have like contention with the term dry tooling for various reasons. In New England, where I'm from, it's like a puritanical, like, oh, it just sounds dirty. Ugh. So Tom, who I was talking about, he actually put a call out there. So if anyone could come up with a different name for dry tooling and it sticks, he will give you a new pair of Nomics,
right?
Or Extremes. It seems like you guys are well on your way.
If you were to say dry tooling to anybody in the UK that doesn't know about the club or what we're doing, they would think of scratching around in a dirty cave with your ice axes. Yeah. Like outdoor dry tooling in the UK is pretty grotty and a bit shit.
Yeah.
What we've done is we've made dry tooling sexy. Now you can come to an indoor climbing center where it's warm. You can climb on specifically made competition style dry tooling holds and climb with nice axes that you don't want to take outdoors because they're too pretty. They're made of titanium and carbon fiber. It's a cool thing to do. So it feels a bit weird calling an indoor event or an indoor competition dry tooling because it's not dry tooling. In the same way that if you go mixed climbing and you're climbing a bit on ice and then you step onto the rock, you're not dry tooling, you're mixed climbing. But it's kind of the same thing. And then if you go to a competition, you're using ice axes, and sometimes you're climbing on rock, sometimes you're climbing on ice, sometimes you're climbing on dry tooling holds. So it just feels like there's no real perfect name for it. And this is something that I think the sport at a competition level is kind of suffering with, because it's quite hard to tell people what you do. When I tell people, I'm a professional athlete, I compete internationally for ice climbing, they're like, oh, that's really cool. But then you tell them that there's not that much ice, and they're really confused. So I think for the sport, there's kind of been a suggestion at the UIA level where we actually look at calling competition side of this sport winter sport climbing. And the main reason being that sport climbing is now a well-known household name for a sport in the Olympics. Have you seen climbing in the Olympics? Oh yeah, sport climbing. I watched that. It's really cool. If you can then say, I do the winter equivalent. I'm a winter sport climber. People are like, it's exactly the same, but you use ice axes. It's so easy to understand. So whether or not that'll take off is still to be seen. But yeah, it's a difficult one to say exactly what it is we do because it encompasses so many different disciplines of climbing.
I just don't think that you can plan these things. Like, I think when they stood out in front of the White House years ago, they were like, what do you want to call this thing? That's not how you name or do these things. It's like, it just gets given a name. That's why it got called the White House. I don't know why it got called that, but...
Well, the club's only been around for a few years, and it's already seeing a ton of success in a variety of metrics that you've talked about. It's also, you're doing quite well in the comp scene, too.
I think for all of us at the club, people doing well at comps and people doing well at the cave or events is the same thing. I hope that people who never even considered competing or anything like that look at when we go away and what's getting achieved and what can be done. A lot of the people who look onto this and thought like, that's never going to go anywhere or ever do anything or whatever, it has, and it is going somewhere. And we don't just have Willis. Willis is the fucking man right now. But we've got people behind him. And it's like I always say, like, a rising tide will raise all ships. And it will. And because we've got people like Rory and Sam and Robbie who are all crushing it and so good and probably are at where Willis was 2 years ago.
At least,
it's made you a better climber. And with all the girls as well, there was a time they all wanted to be Caitlin and just try to emulate her style or anything. But now they're actually pushing Caitlin to be better.
Now they just want to beat her.
No, they just want to beat her. Yeah, it's like, it's also healthy as well. Me doing well, it's sort of a weird thing. I hate when people say that climbing's like an individual sport or whatever. It's not in any way, especially for us as a team anyway. We're supportive. Each hold that someone else gets, you might as well get yourself. It's just all part of the day and everything. It's such a weird sport. Like, I can imagine training so hard and then turning up to a comp and then falling off the third hold. And it doesn't matter who you are. Like, you can have SAS finals on your CV. That route doesn't give a shit. Like, you're off. That's it. It's done. There's so much to qualification that people don't get to see from the live stream, which is amazing. You can do so well on a couple of routes. Say you got 3 routes, and to get into finals, you have to get there. That's an element that can affect some climbers, that they're more than capable of topping that route. But now you've said to them, you have to get there. Just get there and you'll be fine. And you can watch people crumble at that. A lot of time at comps gets rid of that and suppresses that, and people just rock up and get on with it and get it done. But every time someone climbs, it affects the dynamic of the day or something changes. It's just like this ever-evolving day out, and then you have the finals. It's a case of just let Jesus take the wheel at that point, I think, for anyone. They're just like, fuck it, I've had a long day. Like, whatever happens, we're winning. Yeah, like, fuck it.
The comp side of it, we are seeing results though. And like the work that we've put in is starting to kind of pay off. Looking at the club as a whole, it's so much bigger than just the comp scene. The way I look at competition ice climbing in the club is it's like a department. Because you're saying, oh, you're getting quite businessy when you talk about the club, but we kind of try and run it like a business, not for the financial gain, but for the profits of what we are producing, which is in the comp department, we're looking to produce athletes that get results. That is what we want. In the introduction and kind of like beginners department, we're looking at getting numbers. We're trying to get people into ice climbing. We're trying to get people learning. We're trying to get a procedure for teaching and, kind of like a system for developing the way that we coach ice climbing in the same way that there is in normal rock climbing. In that department of competition climbing, I'd say we've seen the biggest gains recently, very much on what Oz said, where I've been competing for quite a few years now. I have improved more in the last year from having people that I've coached chase me than I have when I was on my own and I kind of didn't have anybody else to kind of push me. That's pretty obvious, but it's funny looking at some of the other athletes or maybe even just some of the other federations and the teams, and they haven't developed those youths. They've kind of been like, are you not kind of like worried that what are you going to do when Rory beats you? And I'm like, I'm going to cry with happiness because I can quit. But no, like I'm joking about that, but like in the sense that people often think like, oh, will you be really annoyed when somebody beats you, when they take the kingpin top seat? And I'm like, no, that'll be a better moment for me when somebody else stands up there on the podium from our team than when all those podiums together have been combined. It does sound a bit like self-sacrificial, but that's the whole point in kind of like building a sport, right? We're not at the time where it's all focused and selfish. And for me, it's all been about producing more athletes that can turn up and perform. And the bigger that group is, the easier it is for everybody to improve. You see, even just the mentality that you have when you're training as a group, it's crazy to think like installing that mentality of, oh, it is possible. The amount of moves that if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I'll go from this hold to that hold when you're pointing holds for people you'd have laughed at me like, get lost. That's not even possible. Whereas see, when you've got more people chasing you and people are kind of literally building the new system of climbing, the new disciplines, the new techniques, and somebody says, oh, I've come up with this and I don't know if it's possible. And then all of a sudden you've got 5 people that are like, that's definitely doable.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden when you're on the wall and you see a move that looks impossible, the mentality isn't, oh, I can't do that. It's, hey, I'm going to try and I might get away with it. And it really is pushing the sport to the next level, and it's pushing the athletes to be better every single time over.
Yeah. If you want to get active in a good team sport, come to dry tooling. If you just want to fucking do things on your own, go and play tennis. Honestly, like it is a great thing to do. Like you can do this on your own or you can do it with other people. If you are anywhere in the world and you have a team or someone who does it, in my eyes, if they're an athlete, they have this right to put you in the right direction or help you out or give you an entry into sport because someone did it for them. The country you might be in might not have like the easiest way in or even advice or something. So just like reach out to people and they will get back to you.
See, when we were talking about starting the Glasgow Dry Tooling Club in the back garden, I remember telling people that we were doing this and people literally laughing in my face, kind of like, that's not going to work. Nobody wants to do that. Don't be crazy. Then we told them about, we were so successful, we've made it into a Scottish Dry Tooling Club and it's going to be nationwide and we're going to go to other climbing centers. And they laughed in our face. And then we did it. And then we said, oh, we're going to run an international competition in the UK. And they said, don't be stupid. No climbing wall will want to do that. You'll never be able to make it financially viable.
They did actually say that. That's not like one of these things they hear. They were actually like, you're off your fucking head.
And then we did it.
Yeah.
And then see, when we said, we're going to win medals at the European Cups and we're going to win world championships. And now we've done it. We've got multiple medals in every discipline. We've got 2 world champions that are all involved in the club. Every member of the GB ice climbing team is a member of the Scottish Dry Tooling Club. You can't say that's just a coincidence. What we are doing works, and the way that we are doing it is the best way of doing it. I get quite like passionate about it because it's like my baby, I started it. Do you know what really annoys me is when I see people doing things that could be done better. They're doing what we're trying to do, but I'm like, do it like this. This works. And they're like, oh no, we're trying to work it out on our own. And I'm like, I'm not trying to tell you how to do this because I think I'm right. I'm telling you I'm right. I'm telling you what we have done in Scotland is the future of this sport. And if anybody wants to argue with me, come and see what we're doing on the grassroots level. Because I think a lot of people hear about, people standing up on the podium and winning a medal. That's big news. It's cool. But see the success, it's not in that moment, that 10 seconds of glory when someone gets a medal put around their neck. The biggest moments for me are when you walk into a climbing center and there are 100 people in an indoor climbing center that's owned by a business that wants to be financially successful, is normally open to the public for rock climbing, and they have shut their doors and told their customers, don't come today because we're having something that's bigger. It's called a Scottish Dry Tooling Club event. And see, when you see 100 normal climbers climbing, frothing at the mouth for dry tooling, that's the moment where you can go, this works. Because it doesn't matter how good you are at the top of the pyramid. If you don't have that base, nothing else matters. And I'm 100% sure that this is like, if I was to get hit by a bus tomorrow, it won't die. It'll keep going until literally we have taken over the world. And that is what we've built. We've built a system for like world domination in this sport. And I really think we're on the way.
This is coming from a man who self-taught himself speed flying and then became a world best. So it's pretty convincing. You seem like the kind of guy that puts his mind to something and can make it happen.
I don't like bullshit. See, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm like, I'm going to do that.
And he's off his fucking head. Like, have you seen the speed flying thing? That's just reckless. Like, that is just insane. There's no need for that at all.
I think if you put a lot of passion into something, you can make anything happen. I think me and the kind of original founders of this club had to put a lot of work in, literally blood, sweat, and tears. And I was exhausted. But see, when you get to stand back a little bit and see what you've achieved, it's brilliant. When you see like Oz coming into the sport and now he's able to do everything that I've kind of done for the club. And you see the youths like Rory, who started as a 14-year-old liability. And like now he's like one of our head coaches. People turn up to get taught by him. He's this guy that like is all knowledgeable in the sport and is able to teach total beginners.
And there's this whole thing about friendship as well. Like, I'm in my 30s and like Rory's 17, he's one of my best friends. Like, legitimately is one of my best mates because he's just this fucking great guy. We all try and help each other out as much as we can. I think it's all because at the back of our minds constantly we're like, we'll do this and it'll be a good thing for the club, or we're always motivated to do it. I've got this thing when I go to bed at 10 o'clock and between 10 o'clock at night and 12, this is like the Willis's hours of when he gets business done because my phone will go ping, 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 and I get my jobs for the next day. Just some of the ideas that Willis has floated across to me. I remember the CIC meet. Willis was like, right, we're going to go to the CIC hut. And I was like, right, okay, cool. Like, we're going to get loads of people to apply and they're all going to come. And I was like, okay, good. And he's like, we're going to get a chef. We're going to get Liam from the climbing centre up there to cook for 4 people. And I was like, no, that's a god-awful idea. Like, think of how hard it is. The best idea he's ever had. I'm quite good at eating humble pie because I've got to do it a lot. But that was one of the finest decisions that we did. The CIC meet is like one of the most sought-after events that we run in a year, where we get like hundreds of applicants. Get out, go climbing on the bend. And even in the application forms, they're like, I don't care if the conditions are good or bad or whatever. We just got to go to the hut and have a crack and eat amazing food for like a week. It is a really good thing. I think there's always fresh ideas coming about how we can do more or offer something to people. I don't know. We're just always trying to think of like the next thing, like what we do. We're never just happy with what we have. And I think that's where clubs have gone wrong in the past, is where they think like, oh, we're all wads, we're all really good, but don't look after the youth and they don't feed into that. Just trying to keep the club moving constantly with like fresh ideas and like listening to our members as well to make that happen.
We built an entity where bonkers is the norm. So like crazy ideas, it doesn't feel crazy to voice them. You're like, hey, I think we should do this. If it was a normal club where, you kind of do things the normal way, everybody would kind of be like, that's never going to work. But see, when you got like everything everybody says is batshit crazy.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, hey, I've got this crazy idea. I think I can make it work. And you get like 90% of people being like, let's do it. And all of a sudden you got this system of like, hey, let's take every idea that's bonkers and make it happen.
Yeah. I've normally found the people who are like, oh, that won't work or that's not going to happen. You know what they're doing? Absolutely bugger all. So I'd rather do things like take a chance or maybe go, all right, okay, let's do it differently or whatever. But you just have to keep having a stab at things, and it is working out really, really well.
We've not had a bum steer yet.
No, I've not had a bum steer yet. It's been good.
Well, the stodgy type are probably not dry tooling to begin with. I would imagine.
Yeah, I've seen people come into events and kind of just be like a wee bit cagey or a wee bit loose, and by the time they leave, they're absolutely fine, because it's one of these sports that you can't have an ego about. Just because you're wearing a GB top doesn't mean you're going to get spat off a hole the same as someone who's never done it. It's always the case that you go to show people how to do a sequence that you might have even set yourself, and you're getting a wee bit carried away and a wee bit full of beans, and the next thing you know, you're falling off. It's a good thing as well for people who just come into it to see people who they think are meant to be really good at it having a nightmare or falling off, or it happens to everyone. And I think if you go to a rock climbing gym, people will climb at a grade that they're very, very comfortable with constantly and never push that grade because they don't want to fall, don't want to make an arse of themselves. If we go to events and we try and climb each other's problems and stuff, we don't know what's there. You can't hide behind how good you think you are. You actually have to be that good.
Yeah.
You're clearly the sort of bonkers, audacious types. So where do you see the club going?
As we progress, we do want to keep things the same as well, like we talked about earlier on about the ethos and the whole matter of it being fun. But I think it's spreading it further, going to climbing centres that we haven't been to, and also speaking to people or maybe breaking into groups of people that we haven't done before. That's something that we're massively doing at. We try and hold an event once a month, so that's 12 events a year, but we actually do so much more than that if you break down. Like, we had an international meeting the last time. That's something we definitely want to do more of as well. It would be excellent if we could maybe find others in the UK to have like a different branch of the Scottish Dry Tooling Club, find people who are psyched as we are, like Willis talked about earlier, show them how we've done it and everything, like give them a template of how to run a club, and to try and establish one maybe somewhere in England, further down, or London or something like that. That's like big picture. Also, keep feeding people into the GB team as well. Keep the psyche really high. Not worry about the members that we don't have, but just make sure that the members that we do have are getting like looked after and getting the enjoyment they need. If we can make the club a better place to be a member, that's always something we want to do.
I think for the UK scene, developing that to a point where it's everywhere is really important for us, so that those that are at home, that are members that maybe aren't focused on a specific discipline within the club, get more out of it, more events, more stuff, like Oz said. And then I think on the kind of the international world domination level plans.
Mr. Burns sat here with a white cat.
But it's true, I truly believe that we are already, probably mainly through the fact that the lack of so far, but we are already kind of the world leading dry tooling club.
We're the biggest dry tooling club in the world.
We've got the most members, we've got the most kit, we've got the most enthusiasm to keep pushing it forward. But I really want to see the club kind of like recognized as that. Not just those that are in the know, but I want to see the club recognized as the world leading, kind of not authority, well, maybe authority to the point where, like, we want to be producing the athletes, but we also want to be producing the holds. We also want to be producing the route setters and the modern style of where the movement comes from. I think we want to be really like involved at every level. The competition side of that is the top end of the sport. And like a lot of things, the top end drip feeds down into everything. So if we can affect that top end by being involved with the UIA, I'd love to see the UIA come to us and say, hey, you guys have got route setting specific dry tooling trained setters. Can you run a course so that, because the UIA is looking at doing that, so that the international setters are setting at a level which is deemed acceptable? My background in professional career is route setting and training route setters. And I'd love to see that kind of standardization come to the UIA and the competition scene in the same way as it has for IFSC and the Olympics. On that level, that means, having specific holds that are built for the scene and they're the only ones that are allowed to be used. Having people that are authenticated and official for judging, for belaying, for coaching, and building that entire structure on a much bigger level that we've built in the UK and taking it to the international scene. So regardless of whether you're from New Zealand, Switzerland, or wherever, if you want to get into dry tooling, you're like, number one hit on Google is Scottish Dry Tooling Club. If you want to go to a competition, you go and register with the Scottish Dry Tooling Club through it so that you can get involved in all the things that we're doing to make you a better climber. So yeah, I really think just doing what we've done, but on a much bigger level, to the point where we have a hand and a say in everything. Because I think the people that are doing a sport the most are the best people to talk to of where it needs to improve and also what doesn't work. Having hand in hand with the UAA and the competition scene with that will really help just improve it for everybody, regardless of what level you're at. That's kind of what we started this club for, was to make it more accessible and to give people the opportunity to climb.
Speaking of international competitions, do you see this going to the Olympics at any point? I know that there's some requirements for like summer new sports to be introduced. It's something like 1,200 athletes need to be registered for like your home country. Just curious about like what your thoughts are on Olympic adoption at some point.
It's very much a focus of, I think, from an athlete level of focus. A lot of the athletes would dream for it to become an Olympic sport. It's definitely got to the point where like the International Federation, the UAA, it is a goal for them, and it kind of has been for the last decade, to get ice climbing recognized as an Olympic sport in the Winter Olympics. If you look at it from an outsider's perspective, it's common sense. Rock climbing is in the Summer Olympics, ice climbing is in the Winter Olympics. But as you touched on, there is kind of prerequisites and requirements for the Winter Olympics that are quite strict, with the amount of snow and ice that a sport has to be performed on. And we've kind of explained, ice climbing is almost too easy at the competition level, that we use a lot of dry tooling holds. We use a lot of kind of different systems and different kind of structures to be able to climb on, to make it more difficult for the athletes, which does make it very difficult as a winter sport, because even trying to explain what it is, you're ice climbing, but you're not very often on ice. That's something we as a sport need to look at. How do we introduce more ice? But as we all know, the world's changing pretty dramatically quite fast. Winter sports are going to have to start looking at changing their rules, because if you look at the Chinese Winter Olympics just recently, every single grain of snow and ice was man-made. There wasn't a single natural snow fiber, which is crazy. It's quite obvious. You're looking at the live streams of the finals of the ski jumping, and it's a massive industrial estate. And then you've got this man-made snow structure in the middle. So I do think the IOC and the Olympic standard and rules will have to adapt to global warming and the way that the world is heating up. And it's just not very easy to have ice 24/7 year round every winter. With our sport, we're quite adaptable with that, because we can put ice on or we can take it off, and it will work both ways. But I think there's going to be this juggling act from the sport currently and what we have and what's required for the Olympics. And there's going to have to be give and take from both sides, I think. Do you want it to go Olympic?
See, when things like this happens, everyone automatically thinks that, getting into the Olympics will be this amazing, awesome thing. So I've been thinking about it for ages, and it's hard for me to have like a rock solid opinion on the whole thing. But yes, it would be. It becomes a lot more professional and everything. But the one element that would change about it, see, everyone that competes just now, 99% of them do it off their own pocket, and they're there for the love of it, not for any other reason. I love that purity of the sport. And it's the same as like rugby was during the 90s. It wasn't professional. It's only become professional very, very recently. And then money gets involved. The standard goes through the roof. But what we're doing just now is very much in like the infancy of it, I guess. It will be professional, and everyone that does it will be their full-time job one day. I'm no doubt of that. But I just love this period where we're in just now, that everyone is just like raking down the side of their couch for a few quid, trying to go to the next comp, for the efforts and the level they're going to compete for their country and for the team. They're not getting paid for it. They're not even...
They're paying for the privilege.
They're paying for the privilege, yeah. Getting into the Olympics would be very, very, very cool. It is the way things go, isn't it? As long as they put on comps for guys like me to go and climb it. Once that happens, that would be sick. Good things and bad things to come out of the Olympics, I think.
I don't think it's like sliding doors. I don't think it's like yes or no with whether or not the sport will be successful.
Yeah.
If you look at the sport and the passion people are putting into it, that's the recipe for making the sport successful, regardless of whether or not it goes Olympic. If you look at downhill mountain biking, they have absolutely no ambition to become an Olympic sport. It should be, it could be, it ticks all the right boxes, but like nobody that watches that sport, from the fans to the athletes to the people that run the events, give a damn about the Olympics, because it's so successful on its own. You don't ride for a country, you ride for a team. Mm-hmm. And like maybe that's a direction where competition ice climbing goes, where it gets so big on its own circle. We have the Krukanogi team and the ICT team and the Scottish Dry Tooling Club team competing in a sport, rather than having, per nation. And that level of like professionalism can still happen without it being an Olympic sport. I don't think it has to be. But I do think for this sport, especially with rock climbing being in the Summer Olympics, it's a very good stepping stone that will boost the professionalism and the kind of enthusiasm from the outside world for this sport, which will make it better no matter what.
I'm going to sound like a 45-year-old mother of four, but I just want everyone to have fun. That's what I want.
This sport really is at an interesting point in its development, because I've talked with a bunch of people that really would love to see the sport grow, especially in their like local community. For folks that are trying to get initiatives off the ground and spur things where they are, do you have any advice for them?
If they could try and get like a smallish piece of a wall and maybe a few old climbing holds and take a drill to them and then put them in the resin holes and then just start from there. Like if you can get a few meters of wall so you can start moving about, create a wee bit of psyche and a wee bit of a community. And I'm watching some guy just now, he's getting containers online, putting them together. And
yeah, John Blackwood.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah, great guy. And I'm loving what he's doing. And he's like a prime example of that. He's obviously creating something that a lot of people can come to. And he's done that from nothing. If you want something bad enough, it will come.
I think having some belief in that what you want, if you've got like a passion for something and you want something, there is likely other people that want it as well. And having a little bit of self-belief in what you do will actually pay off. You have to plant that seed though. Like if you don't plant the initial seed, like you're saying, get a facility. I'm not saying you have to go out and buy a rock climbing gym, but you have to put effort in. And it sounds silly. The effort that you put in for starting something like this, you will not personally gain from. In the same way that like people are like, oh, you've set this really cool dry tooling event. You're going to get to climb loads of routes. That's great. And I'm like, I am so knackered. I cannot pull on a single move. I am going to get to climb absolutely zero of these routes that I've set. You guys are going to have a great time and I'm going to go and have a nap. Like, but that's the reality of it. It is self-sacrificing. See, doing something for the greater good. I always laugh at what's that film, Hot Fuzz? Where they're like, the greater good. But it's exactly that. You have to produce a system where everybody's like looking at the greater good. Everybody has to like sing off the same hymn chart of being like, right, we're going to do this. It's kind of going to suck for us. But if we want something that's better for us in the later term, then we have to put a little bit of effort in now. And you do something and it works or it doesn't work and more people get psyched. And then the people that you find are psyched for it, that come out of the woodwork, that are like willing to help you is crazy. People that you've never met live hundreds of miles away are like
Rich coming from Portsmouth.
Yeah, I'm going to drive 500 miles because you're doing this thing and I'm going to come and help you. And you're like, excuse me, who are you?
Yeah.
And then they turn up and they're like, the best person ever, and they help out loads, and you're like, Christ, if we had 10 of you, this would be really good. And then all of a sudden, you have 10 of them, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, do you guys want to set this event so I can come and enjoy it? And then you get that moment where you're like, this is what it's like when you've produced something, and you get to like, you get to, what's it called? Pluck the fruits of success or whatever it is. But like, it's true. You have,
of your labor.
You really have to put in a load of effort at the start and be willing to get absolutely hee-haw back.
See, I've been bad for this in the past where I've gone, we're never going to get to European Cup finals because we don't have a structure. Willis has been to the finals and we've got like an 8-meter square box. Like that's all we have. So there's actually people out there who have far greater setups than us, far greater structures, World Cup venues and everything. I would just massively suggest on getting 5 or 6 holes, build a wall and just build it from there. It does not even require like hundreds of money.
We're obviously here talking about what we've done, but like little old Scotland has done something good here. And if you want help, let us know. If you said, look, we want to run an event and we don't have any holds, can you ship us a box of 30 holds? We've got the world's largest collection of competition ice climbing holds of anywhere in the world, from every sort of corner of the earth. If they produce ice climbing holds, we've got them. We're more than happy to kind of put a box together and like, here's an event in a box. Do something with it and send them back when you're done. And
like, do you guys get HelloFresh? You know where you order your meals and then it tells you how to cook it and everything. We could do a similar thing, and I don't know, I could do like a wee tape recording to just be like,
maybe we'll just put you in a box. If we put Oz in a box,
Scottish Dry Tooling Club Fresh. Hello, that'd be
instead of like packaging, we could put a lot of holds in there with you and then just like ship you off around the world and be like, here's a dry tooling event in a box.
Yeah.
You want to do like a 30-second ad placement right now off the cuff, and I'll put it in the episode at the beginning.
Hello there. If you want to run a dry tooling event, please get in touch with the Scottish Dry Tooling Club, and we will help you run the sickest event you and your friends have ever seen. Thank you. Too much? Too little?
I thought the HelloFresh model was a little bit of Quicker to get to,
our
but no, it
contact
was nice.
details are on the website. Get in
Yeah.
touch with the club.
Yeah.
Have a look what we're doing on Instagram, social media, the website, and if any of it takes your fancy and you want to know how we did it or what we did to get to that point, just get in touch. Send us a message. We will get back to you. We will help you, regardless of where you're from, where you're at in your dry tooling journey. You know, if you want to start it, come and chat to us.
We will help.
Thanks so much, guys. It was awesome chatting with you. It's really impressive what you and Caitlin and everyone else have done. So kudos to all of you.
I guess that's one thing I want to say as well is like me and Oz are here doing this chat, but like everybody that's a member of the club is here with us in the sense that like this isn't our moment. I say that when when you get up on the podium and you take a medal, like that is not my moment. That is not that person's individual. Like everybody that has a play in the club has a play in that moment. And, it's so hard to just forget that it's not just us two sat here taking all the credit. In fact, we try not to take any credit because we know how many people are behind the scenes that do so much for the club. And it's not always the physical side of things. It's not the route setters that are putting the hold on the wall or the guys that are doing the coaching, but it's the people behind the computers doing the accounts and making sure the money works and paying the invoices and buying the holds and organizing things and just like absolutely to the finest detail, the amount of work that everybody puts into this club that is behind the scenes is so impressive. And from, the top end of the committee, me and Oz as VP and president, like it's a big thank you to you guys as well. Cause without the members and without the volunteers, this does not exist. So thank you to all those guys that are in the club. It really, it means something to us.
If you'd like to learn more about the Scottish Dry Tooling Club, their Instagram has all the important links. It is at Scottish Dry Tooling Club. As Willis alluded to in the interview, the 7th and final round of the UIAA Ice Climbing Continental Cup for the season is taking place in Sunderland, UK this Saturday, February 10th. Live streaming will be available, I believe, on YouTube for the finals. And lastly, for the price of a beer a month, just a lowly beer, probably not a double IPA, but you can help us produce episodes like this and much, much more. If you've been enjoying the podcast this season, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/IceIceBeta.